Today I'll be talking with prolific composer, keyboardist, and general mad genius Jim Beard. Jim's had a vast career, which includes playing with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, John Scofield and Pat Metheny. He's recorded with Wayne Shorter, Dave Liebman, and Michael Brecker, who has also recorded several of Jim's compositions on his albums. He's been the producer and, more often than not, keyboardist and composer with the likes of Bob Berg, Bill Evans, Randy Brecker, Ileana Elias, and Mike Stern. Most notably, Jim's released 6 beautiful solo albums and is currently the longtime keyboardist with Steely Dan. Jim was my very first guest on this series and somewhat the inspiration for a lot of episodes to follow. Instagram changed the way that they allow capture over the summer, and the only way that I could capture this particular episode was to do screen capture. For those of you watching the video, you'll see text over Jim's face and you'll see some artifacts, but hopefully you still enjoy the great things that he has to say. Along with other technical challenges, my first question to Jim did get chopped off the beginning of the video, so I'll pose that question here. Jim, let's talk about inspiration. How do you start with ideas?
Oh boy, you mean specifically when composing, or because?
Yeah, I mean when when composing, or Pat Metheny talks about this process of waiting for the bus. Is that your process, or do you? Are you ritualistic? Do you make time every day, or do you have a schedule?
No, I don't make time every day. I think there probably was a point when I did do that. I know what he means by waiting for the bus. I've for every 10 ideas I come up with for writing something, I usually throw about 9 of them out. It's just a feeling. Something has to throw a switch inside of me that says, okay, this is worth pursuing. And the original idea for a song can come from any number of places. It can be, it can start as sort of maybe a groove idea and a bass line, or it might, I'm a big fan of games, so it might just be some sort of little harmonic game I'm trying to play. Or it might be something I heard that just inspired me. But the ultimate requirement for me is that the end result should always sound like music, and it shouldn't sound like a physics science experiment or that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. And it should be complete.
Yeah, it should be complete. And usually what happens for me is after I get 8, 16, or 24 bars of something, it's a weird phenomenon or sensation. It almost feels like the song just takes over, and it sort of writes itself in a way.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, and how you edit and how you decide to not. In fact, you already answered some of the questions I was going to ask coming up about the idea of having all this scraps of compositions on the cutting room floor that don't make the cut. Because right. I'm a composer who I'm filled with self-loathing for most of it.
Oh, I know that one well. You're an honorary member of the I Hate Myself Club.
Yeah, and I guess if I wake up the next day and I don't hate it, then I can.
Yeah, that's a good start. That's a good start.
But then, how do you the edit process? Do you have a long edit process? If you have a germ of an idea, and then are you working with it for a while, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of things I've done, sort of demoing the piece as I'm writing it is an integral part of the process. I'll actually begin demoing the song and using a groove of making samples and things of like already imagining who might play it very well, and sort of demoing it. And I'll put some pieces of it together, then put it away, and then maybe while hanging out or cooking or something, just kind of casually listen to it, not with the sort of studious brain on, but just as a music listener. And then a lot of times when that's happening, things become obvious. What should change and what should stay.
Oh well. Yeah, so then from there, it's a process of fleshing it out on the computer and making something that feels like it would eventually become something you'd want to record.
Exactly. I work on it to the point where I feel like it's complete, And but there have been a few things I've written where it just I didn't really demo it. It just all made like for example, The Gentleman and His Cane on Michael Brecker's album. I think it's Don't Try This at Home. I think it's on that one. And or like something like Holodeck Waltz on Song of the Sun. Those, you know, I just got like an initial idea, and I don't know, it just all just sort of come out, and I was happy with it. So,
do you always write at the keyboard, or do you write away from the keyboard ever?
I've had ideas away from the keyboard, and if you know, like, and I'll sing it or do something with the voice memo in the phone or something like that. But primarily, I do write at a keyboard, whether it's electronic or piano.
Okay, well, this is a great segue for me to talk about this thing that we talked about yesterday. I think it was this story that I heard, and I think Tim LaFave told me the story about you hearing, you having your cassette recorder on the subway platform and recording somebody playing, a street musician playing on the platform, and then the subway doors chimed. And it became
exactly. Yeah, well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I had my micro cassette recorder in my pocket. This is when I was living on the Upper West Side, and I was paying a monthly garage fee for a car that I had. And they kept putting dings in the side of the door, and I was getting bugged about it. So I went to talk to the parking garage manager about it, and I just wanted to record the conversation just to have it recorded. And so I got done with that, and my studio was on 30th Street, so I took the, it's the 1, 2, 3 line down, and I guess it was the 72nd Street station. And the doors opened up, and there's this guy, I'm guessing of African descent, in a beautiful colored robe, very long, playing this very strange instrument that was taller than he was, a stringed instrument. I don't even know what you would call it. And then the doors closed, and then I got to my studio, and I started thinking, that was so beautiful what he was playing, and you know, I wish I could remember it exactly how it went. I kind of had an idea, and then I was going through my pockets, and there was my micro cassette recorder, and it was still rolling. So I got very excited, and I went back to the point and got to hear what he was playing. I could, if you want, I can go show you, actually.
You have it?
It was something like this. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
It was like.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was just beautiful. And then, like, what I heard on the recording was all of a sudden was like.
Right. Right.
And those were the doors closing, and there's still some subway cars, that older model, that are still working today.
That's the R46, and it sounds like this. So I have it, and I also have this.
But I still think that, you know what I realized later was that, and that came on to be the inspiration for the song I'll Miss You on a Bill Evans record. And I think you're on that record too, right?
Yeah, can you hear this? I just played it. I don't know if you heard.
No, I'm not hearing that.
Oh, can you guys hear that?
I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it's possible that this audio is not working anymore. I don't know.
But you know what I realized was that, you know, this guy's sitting on a platform for hours a day, and it occurred to me that he probably purposely tuned his instrument in the key of B major, because that's all he's hearing all day besides himself is D sharp to B natural.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was going to play this. I had this stuff all queued up, and I was supposed to play through, you know, my system's not working so hot here. But
there you go. Yeah, there it is. That's the key.
Right. And then here's the song.
There it is. That's it. That's it.
I think the subway, the MTA has something to say about the copyright there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
They wrote the melody.
Yeah. Well, when they fix everything up, we'll deal with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So then you started with that thing, and then you just developed it from there, and that was the stem of that song.
And that was the seed, the germ of the song. Yes.
And so when you get that germ, because I remember talking to Lyle Mays about this idea about songs having dramatic shape and how they should take you on a journey. Did you start to have a vision for the song as a whole before you wrote it, or did you write as you went?
No, I wrote as I went. I knew that I liked that idea, and but and with a lot of things I do. I mean, so many people, especially quote unquote jazz composers, they write 16 bars of music, 8 of which is played 3 times, and then they tell someone to blow a 10-minute solo on it, and they call it done. and that's never been, I mean, that's great for what that is, but that's never been what sort of, rings my bells and whistles. That I agree with Lyle. Like, I kind of feel like there should be some sort of story. I've always, a lot of times when I'm writing something, I kind of get these imaginary characters in my head, and as if they're in a story, and then I kind of try to decide if is this character, melancholy? Is he humorous? Is he angry? Does he have a funny walk? And what are his friends like, or her friends like? And so it kind of gets this little fantasy world definitely at a certain point plays a very strong role in when I'm writing.
Well, you have a lot of evocative titles, so possibly some of those titles are inspired by these fictitious characters.
Well, I mean, it depends on depends on which title. I've actually been stuck and had friends give me titles, and some of them, like this guy, a good friend of mine, Stan Harrison, has come up with a couple of titles. He came up with "Holiday for Pete and Gladys."
Yeah.
Because I played it. Hadn't recorded it yet, but I was playing him the demo, and he said he loved. Because I was going to ask, he played on the record in the horn section.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says, wow, that sounds like Holiday for Pete and Gladys. I said, what's Holiday for Pete and Gladys? He said, it's this old 50s weekly, show. And I said, great, that's it. And then, I mean, recently, now that, it's by the way, it's a lovely rainy day. It's a great day to stay home. But I've been catching up on, like, I really love Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I loved it when it came out, and I'm enjoying watching all the reruns. And some of those holodeck episodes are just so cool. They're just so strange and odd. And
we could use a little nationwide holodeck about now.
Yeah, and so I don't know. It depends on the title and all that.
And so, talking about something sounding like something else, what are your musical influences? I read, of course, that you came up playing jazz and you had your Oscar period and you were checking out various musicians, but there's so much other stuff in your writing, tango and Latin influences and things like that. And I hear all these different influences and, of course, classical influences. But I'm curious about, and, of course, allowing for your taste to change, but can you think about influences that have been a major part of your idea bank and trending bank? And it doesn't have to be specific people, but maybe types of music that you listen to that affected your writing considerably.
Okay. Well, I've always been very interested in a great variety of music. I mean, my earliest memories are one of the first artists I really loved as a very young child was, Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. And And I just, you know, there was some kind of adventurous arranging going on with some of those records. And I remember loving marching bands. And then, you know, soon after that, my sister's 9 years older than me, but she was a Beatles freak. And I used to borrow her 45 player and listen to Beatles 45s, you know, when I was about 6 years old, up in my bedroom. And then I took music lessons, and I started really, I never had a problem with classical music. I really enjoyed it. And then as pop things would come out, I would love them. But it always had to sort of trigger something emotionally for me. As much as, I can love, was that Brahms, the Intermezzo #2 is absolutely gorgeous, but I can love in the same way, Mongo Jerry, in the summertime, that really can hit me deep as well. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
and then when I got serious into jazz, I kind of felt like I had to, put the jazz hat on and wave the jazz flag and go to the jazz church. And I had to, something in me said, oh, I should put those other things away. But I always, even during that period, I was a closet, pop fan. But I actually think a lot of influence came from, I was lucky to get to work quite a long time with Wayne Shorter, but that first tour we did was doing the music of Atlantis.
Yeah.
And he sent me, all the scores, and they were like they were copies, but they were his handwritten, staff, and all the detail was there. And it was just the most amazing thing going through all those pieces and just, I mean, it was extremely challenging, but really an eye opener. And he would have some strange influences on some songs. And, then I got to do the Phantom Navigator. I can't remember. He used to say things like, because he was always speaking metaphorically. He'd never tell anybody exactly what to play or what not to play, but he would just sort of say what he wanted it to sound like.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times his things he would, his metaphors would be very strange, unusual, odd things, like the Space Brigade is coming to attack, and but just complete fantasy, and just like, yeah, why not? It's just.
Well, if it inspires the right direction of emotional reaction, then he had enough trust in you as a musician that you were going to play musically, and he was just trying to give you somewhere to go with your musicianship, I suppose.
Yeah. It was a tall order to pull off live, but it went well, and I got to probably the most fun period with him was in the mid '90s when we were doing music from Atlantis, High Life, a lot of modern records, but he was starting to scatter in a lot of those classic Blue Note pieces too, just in their original form, and that was a real gas.
Yeah, astounding. Really, really. He was one of the leading composers who transcended into very modern writing and using very modern instruments in his bands and his recordings. And actually, it's a good segue for me to ask you about Song of the Sun.
Okay.
And I know that was your first solo record, but I remember asking you about that record and your synths and all that stuff, and you told me that you were going to, when you started working on composing, you had a choice about buying this gear or that gear, and some people said, no, you should get some synthesizers, and you invested in some synthesizers and started orchestrating your stuff, writing orchestrally for the synthesizer. Was the Song of the Sun, was that the result of that concept of writing orchestrally for synthesizer?
I think so.
Am I asking the question the wrong way? Because
no, well, I mean, I started buying, when I originally got, the first keyboard I ever got was the Mark I, I think it was a 1975 Fender Rhodes 73 keyboard model. And I got that keyboard because I was so in love with the two Herbie records, the Headhunters records.
Right.
And I just told my dad, I said, I got to get a Fender Rhodes. That's it. You know, no argument. But that was it for many years until I got into college. And then I was asked to join a bar band, and I had to have more than a Fender Rhodes. So I bought, and actually he's still there at Indiana University, a guy named Luke Gillespie. He's their jazz piano professor, but he sold me his clavinet. I worked for someone on a cruise ship, and I didn't save any money, but I did buy a Krumar string machine. And then, you know, and then I got a Micro Moog. So that was 4 keyboards, and that was my sort of bar band setup. And
a Krumar string machine for a bar band.
Yeah.
What kind of bar hits were you playing with the Krumar string machine?
But you know what? That was really an eye-opener. I'm getting a little off topic here, and I'll get back to what you were asking. But, you know, I was asked to play in this bar band in Bloomington, and, you know, John was in that band, and Kenny Aronoff was the drummer. Bob Hurst was the bass player. And it was an eye-opener for me because we were playing a lot of music that I knew I loved, and I was still sort of Mr. Jazz hat guy. But it became apparent to me that it's, you know, as much as like serious jazz players like to dismiss, oh, it's just some pop stuff. You know, I really quickly learned that to play it well is not easy. It's
right.
It's a whole art form in itself, and I really developed a great respect for, you know, that genre of music and all that. So anyway, I had those old keyboards, and then I worked on cruise ship for another year, and then I sort of mothballed them and moved to New York. I don't think I took any of those keyboards with me to New York. Oh, I got a DX7 because, I was asked to play some club dates and stuff like that. But anyway, you're right. And the thing is, I got asked to join John McLaughlin Mahavishnu, and I definitely needed some serious gear. And I think I had been, at that point, I was lucky to have an apartment in Brooklyn that had a little soundproof studio room at the end with a baby grand piano. But I had to move soon, and I was thinking of buying a nice piano. And you're right. I was advised it might be more a better investment to sort of get going in that other department. And getting the gig with John McLaughlin helped that a lot. So anyway, now back to your question. I have been demoing and writing stuff ever since I got the Fostex 4-track recorder. That was the hot item back in 1985.
That was cassette, or that was like its own proprietary tape vibe?
It was a cassette player that just 4-track.
Because they had the one with the big reels, the like small reel-to-reel inside that had the kind of smoke.
Yeah, it had a lid, but I mean they were normal sized cassettes. At least the one I had. Yeah, I mean, except it all went one direction, and it was like 2 stereos going to the sound.
Yeah, right.
It was a 4-track recorder.
I had a Fostex one of those.
Yeah, and but I've been demoing and had ideas, and I realized though, because I'm such a fan of orchestra music that to me, ultimately the synthesizers just became for me like the poor man's orchestra, and if you're just hearing things, well, I can't get real French horns, so let's get something that sounds smooth and mellow and beautiful. And I don't have piccolos and triangles, but let's find a sound that's sparkly and high. So
But I feel like you did something with that record, that record that you couldn't have achieved with great. Even if you had great samples back then, it wouldn't be the stand-up record that it is today, because you did something with the sounds, to me, that still feels timeless in that record, and that's quite something for a 30-year-old record with synths to feel timeless.
It's not that old.
Okay.
All right.
But I think that there was something beautiful in that, in the way that Wendy Carlos did with Switched on Bach, in the same way, and orchestrally using synthesizers in a way that felt timeless. So it was desire to create orchestrated music, but with synthesizers.
Yeah, and I was a huge fan of Wendy Carlos's work. I would many a night as a teenager, those were playing with the headphones on.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. Wendy's still around somewhere.
I know.
On Broadway. Hopefully not going the hell out at all.
Right.
But yeah, so you had just to nerd out a little bit, did you already have your octave Voyetra 8 then? Was that when you picked those up?
Yes, I did. That probably was the first record I used that on. I started with one, then I got a second one. And I also had, by the good graces of Michael Brecker, an Oberheim expander that belonged to him. And he I guess he was he had spares, he had extras because he was going on the road with them, and he let me have one of his. And I guess, what was it? Because my first sampler I ever had was the Ensoniq Mirage.
That was a dog.
Oh God, it was hard. The second sampler I got was the Casio FC1, which was built like a tank, and it was heavy as a tank too. Yeah. And that you could run a tank over that and it wouldn't break. But the Ensoniq Mirage, if you looked at that thing wrong, it would break.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was like kind of the early forays into the sampling world.
But the synth sounds, especially all those synth layers, and if I think about like Baker's Dozen, the synth lead sound there, do you recall if that was a Voyetra or if that was your expander?
In Baker's Annex, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Baker's Annex. Sorry, not Baker's Dozen. Baker's Annex.
That was definitely a Voyetra. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody who wants that sound, because somebody asked me specifically, knowing that I was going to do this interview, to ask about that sound, that's okay. Just find the Voyetra is about $11,000 right now. So, or maybe Jim will sell you one.
Well, you know what? That's a funny thing. I don't know. I probably shouldn't say his name. There's a guy who works on them, and I gave him one of my Voyetras to work on, and hadn't heard back for ages and ages. And I finally called him again, and he had to move his shop to another part of town. And basically, he said he doesn't know where it is.
Yeah, I know who that is. I know who that.
You know who that is?
Yeah, I do. I do. It's mysteriously gone missing, huh?
Yeah, it's just mysteriously gone missing.
Oof, sorry.
No.
But before I go on, I want to go back to the cruise ship because of the story that maybe you told me, or Tim told me, or Zach told me about Girl from Ipanema.
Oh,
I worked on a cruise ship I worked on 3 different cruise ships, and they can be rather dismal places. Although I think they've been a rite of passage. Maybe not so much anymore, but a lot of musicians worked on cruise ship. In fact, Tim LaFave worked on a cruise ship for several years. Zach Danziger met Tim on a cruise ship.
Right. And Pete Davenport.
Right.
We were on the same ship for a while.
You were on the ship with Pete Davenport. Yeah, I was on a ship. I was on a few different ships, and they could be depressing. In fact, to move to New York, I worked on a cruise ship for 4 months, and it was very, very dark. And I had a map of Manhattan on my cabin wall, and I said, "That's what it's for. I'm going to get the hell out of here." But evidently, you used to play "Girl from Ipanema," and
well, just the first 2 bars of it.
Just the first 2 bars of it.
Yeah, I mean, and like literally for 8 or 10 minutes.
And nobody noticed.
Well, I mean, all these, we called the passengers, we called them coneheads.
Yeah, coneheads, yeah.
And yeah, they would, these old couple, they just get up and dance. They didn't know, and they didn't care, so.
And you just kept it going. Did anybody ever say anything?
No, but I think after a certain point, the music director guy, he took us out of that lounge.
I wonder why. Look, I have all these notes. I was going to ask you things, and you're just talking is more interesting than my notes. But So when you were working on Song of the Sun, were you making MIDI sketches, like sequence sketches? Because I guess the Voyatra had MIDI, like a rudimentary MIDI. Because that was Song of the Sun would have been before ADATs.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I demoed those songs on I guess
On the 4-track.
No, or wait a minute. No, I got to remember. That might have been right when DAT came out, DAT tape, digital audio, and there was a small portable one that it was actually really good. I can't remember who made that. Might have even been Casio.
Or JC or something.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's gone now. But it was I guess it was a Mac Plus, and Mark of the Unicorn was the company. Opcode, or was it
Opcode? Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't called Digital Performer then; it was just called Performer.
Performer, right?
And so that's what I demoed on for that.
But they were sequences essentially, right? That's how you had multi-track.
They were sequences. It was very basic sequences, and actually no, because I remember when I was recording them. I was recording my demos to just normal cassette, because I remember I had to give Wayne demos of the songs he was going to play on, and it was the Mark Hotel, and I handed him a cassette. I know, prehistoric times, right?
Well, everybody had it because that was the medium.
Yeah, right.
And and you did the same for Creed Taylor. You just said you sent them a DAT, or you sent them a cassette, and you said,
yeah, I sent him a cassette, I guess it was. But I'd met him and worked with him on a couple of previous projects, which is how I sort of got introduced to him.
Mm-hmm. And then, but fast forward a couple of years, I remember coming to your studio and you had the ADAT rig, and you played me some. I remember you being on, it was 30th Street, right? It was across from
the music
time and all the road music and all that.
Well, I had a loft it was on the south side of 30th Street.
Yeah.
15th floor, top floor of the building.
Yeah.
And then right after 9/11, I moved across the street to the building on the north side, 251. Right.
Oh, I came to the south side place, and John Harrington was sort of in the outside room in the loft.
Right.
And you were playing me multi-tracks of Arto, Tunes by Atian.
Oh, yeah.
Playing various rhythm things. And I think that might have been for Truly, or maybe it was Lost at the Carnival. I'm not sure. Let
me think. No, Arto's, you know what that could have been for? I know what that was for.
That was for Advocate?
No, because the first record of mine that Arto's on is Advocate.
Or maybe it was maybe it's for Trip on Advocate. Was he on that?
Well, it was that, but that could have been. But it depends. If you remember which year it was, that'd be helpful.
I can't remember what year it is now.
Because I think I know. Because I think the first record I really worked on that he was a big part of was actually John Harrington's first solo record. It was called The Complete Rhyming Dictionary.
Yeah,
that was around 92.
This was definitely your stuff.
Okay, so that would have been Advocate then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it could have been a Bob Berg record, because that he was a big part of a couple of Berg records, and that would have been around 96, 97.
Yeah.
So, all right, could have been one of those, yeah. But if it was my record, it was Advocate.
So when you get this stuff, and going back to this process, and you've got these demos, and you're making demos, because I recall coming over and hearing those tracks, and you were working sort of modularly. There wasn't a big, everybody go to the studio and play. It was more like you had done some basics, or you had a structure, and then you would go into the studio and do some basics, and then you'd have people come and play other stuff. Because I remember you doing overdubs.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, so I mean, generally, a lot of times for not everything, but a lot of those records was demo, workout, agree on what the form and arrangement is, and then go track with a rhythm section.
Yeah.
In the studio, transfer to ADATs, and then work on the parts at your home studio.
Yeah.
So like with with Advocate, I had Gene Lake and Matt Garrison, and depending on the song, but they were in there playing live, and then I transfer it, and then sort of go and have my fun with it.
Yeah. Now, how did you the stuff that they would hear in the studio, how fleshed out would that be? And did you deliberately reduce the amount of things that they heard so as to cause them to be more open, or would you add things to give them more?
I would just give them what I thought was essential for them to get the idea.
But responsive musicians like that, if you give them other things to play around or to avoid, then they might act musically in a way that is more what you had hoped for, or maybe you'd be looking for. I don't know if you know what I'm driving at here. The idea of like leaving things wide open for people to play whatever the hell they want, or kind of giving more guideposts.
Oh, I definitely was giving guidance. I knew what I was looking for, but but that's why it's helpful to know who you're picking as well, because you don't want to call someone in that can't give you what you want, and
right, yeah,
and that's the logic behind hiring who you hire, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
You hire who you hire because you know what they're going to give you.
Yeah. Like Wayne Shorter having you play with him a bunch, and you talking about the sort of esoteric directions that he was giving you.
Yeah.
Did he ever ask for something quite specifically of anybody that you witnessed? Or was it all rather general?
I mean, the specifics would be like, okay, we're gonna open up this section, and it's gonna be extended, and this is going to be open and on cue. Or, I think he always tended to surround himself with musicians who were sensitive and paying attention. I mean, that's kind of critical with someone like that. I do remember, and I won't give any names, but it was one of because I was in maybe 7 or 8 or at least that many different incarnations of bands with him. And one of the earlier bands was just a quartet, and it was my feeling that the drummer in this particular band wasn't really listening that much. And it was one night we were playing, and the thing is, Wayne never came out and really said anything, but he just had a look on his face one night. He just looked like someone was hammering a spike through his feet, and and I knew he wasn't happy. I mean, it was anybody who's looking and paying attention could see that.
Yeah. Except
this drummer, and so that was the last tour that drummer did. So I think a lot of that whole world, it's got to be a two-way street. You can be as sensitive and all that gushy stuff as you want, but you gotta get with other people that are the same way.
Yeah. Those empathic skills are really important. And even as a producer, and you've done so much producing, and I remember at one point I was working on, I haven't done anywhere near what you've done, but I remember I was working on one of my very first projects that I was producing, and I had asked you for some advice because I was having some frustrations. And you said the job of the role of the producer, I mean, all complaining aside, the role of the producer is to help the artist realize their vision, which was simple, but absolutely spot on. But it's not always that easy. You've produced some famous artists, some of whom, and I won't name any names, can be a bit challenging. And
who you're talking about.
Yeah, and so how do you handle that? If an artist wants to explore an aesthetic choice that maybe that almost feels repulsive to you, or if they want to go down a rabbit hole with second guessing something and it's going to be a waste of time.
That I learned a lot about producing from Don Grolnick, and I think he's who I originally heard that. The way he put it was, there's two kinds of producers. There's the producer who feels like it's the artist's job to realize the producer's vision. And he said, then there's the producer who feels like it's the producer's job to realize the artist's vision. And he says he always preferred that second one. But besides that, there are some artists who want, it all depends on the artist. Some artists don't really have much together. They want you to help them write. They want you to help them pick musicians. They really want you to carry the ball. They want that, and they're asking for that. And then, so you know that. And then you say, okay, I'll do that for you. And, because another producer might say, I'm going to write for you, and I'm going to pick who you use. When you're asked to do it, that's okay. And then there's other artists I work with who know exactly what they want. They have all their music written. They know exactly who they want to play with. And so that's what it is. A lot of times with artists like that, you're more like a resident shrink than a producer. You're just there to make it all sort of flow and go easy, and that, so it really is a job where you gotta have a closet full of hats.
And have you been able to have you felt times where you feel like you want to strangle somebody, and then you sort of check yourself and pull somebody back from the edge of taking everybody off the cliff with them?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple that come to mind, and we all laugh about it later, but I actually work with an artist and an engineer, a very famous engineer, and this engineer got in touch with me because the record was done, and it was the time to go completely ballistic anal over the mixes.
Uh-huh.
And he called me and he said, is it possible to quit a project after it's over? That we had a good laugh on that one.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so good. And I've heard stories of people saying, all right, well, you can release it, but you have to take my name off it.
Right. That's a good one too, yeah.
I know of stories about that, and that's a tough one. And you were working with Michael Brecker. I'm going a little bit out of order here, but I have these notes. And you were talking about Gentleman and His Cane, and of course, even back then, which was '88, that record was maybe made in '87. You hadn't been in town that long, so I'm not sure how long you'd known Michael Brecker at that point, and how it came about that he ended up recording your composition.
Okay, if my memory serves me correct, I think I first met Michael. He was playing, I think it was with Mark Johnson's Bass Desires at the Vanguard.
Uh-huh.
And I'd only been in town a couple of months, and it was interesting because they were taking a break and back by the kitchen there, and I just introduced myself. I said, hi, Mike. My name's Jim, and it's really nice to meet you. And he says, oh yeah. He says, yeah, I heard about you. And I was like, what? That was interesting. But it was maybe like 6 or 8 months later, and I was working on. It might have been Mike Stern's record, Time and Place, which Michael plays on.
Yeah.
So we got to work together then, and it was just one of those times in the break times, and Mike was saying he's getting ready to make another solo record, his second one, and he's looking for music. And he actually just asked me, he said, "You got any? Do you write? Do you have anything?" I said, "Yeah, I make demos here and there."
Oh, that's
so I gave him a cassette, and he said he wanted to record that tune.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. And then, of course, fast forward to 1990, and you had a couple songs on Now You See It, Now You Don't, including very prominent Ode to Doodah Day, which a lot of people think of as their favorite track from that record. and I want to ask you about the sound at the top, because it was really a sonic masterpiece. The sound.
Just that glissando. That's John Harrington.
It's all John.
That's all John.
Oh well, the interview over. Well, the whole track is really fantastic, and the composition is fantastic.
Thanks.
And Quiet City is also really great. They both really have your stamp on them.
Yeah, well, those were written all during. I had to really be careful because I was writing a lot of the Song of the Sun stuff. It was all like kind of the same batch of material at the same time. So I kind of was also thinking like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to give Michael this one. So I got a little selective.
Yeah, Michael, you get my throwaways. And then, of course, a lot of this stuff, I'm going to jump ahead because I have this note, and it's become one of my favorite records. I've been familiar with all these compositions from those composition and orchestrally intense records, those first 4 records of yours, Song of the Sun. And by the way, you guys, if you don't have these records, you should buy them directly from Jim. Just write to Jim, and I think they're $90 a piece, and he'll sign them, and then... Right? That's a bargain.
It's a bargain, yeah.
Normally $100 a piece. But Song of the Sun, Truly, Lost at the Carnival, and Advocate. Is that the right chronological order?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
But I was familiar with all those compositions, and then Revolutions came, which is this recording you did with the Metropole Orchestra with Vince Mendoza. And you had a relationship with Vince before because you played on Start Here.
Yes.
And I love that record, too. And I love Vince's writing and orchestration.
And also, there's also a Peter Erskine record that Vince did all the work on that I worked on with. Don Gronick was producing that. And also the first time I met Vince was on that Now You See It, Now You Don't, because he had a song on that record called Scriabin.
Right, yeah.
And
so Revolutions, was that... Did the Metropole talk to you? Did you talk to them? How did that come to be?
Okay. Well, I'd done several things with Vince, and we were doing something with the WDR band in Cologne. What was that project? Oh boy, it might have been that Brecker Brothers, some skunk funk with the WDR. That was around 2003 or so.
Yeah.
And again, we're just taking a break and talking, and he actually brought up, he says, because I knew he was the house arranger conductor for the Metropole, and he just mentioned, hey, we bring in guest artists sometimes that do special projects, and would you be interested? And I was like, well, does a bear shit in the woods? Of course I want to, I said yes. And so he worked it out and got together with the management brains over there, and we made a time to do a few days of recording. But the thing, it was only 5 pieces maybe. It was only intended to be a radio broadcast. It was not intended to be a record.
Yeah, I read that.
But we did that, and everybody was sort of so happy with it that I said, hey, it'd be nice to, why don't we record a few more pieces and make it a record? And then Vince ran that idea by the powers that be, and they agreed to it. And we redid a couple of the ones from the original radio session.
Mm-hmm.
I think 3 of them are the original radio session, and then I went back for another 5 days or so and re-recorded a couple of them, and then the new ones as well.
Right. And you I read that you had fleshed out the orchestrations and then passed them off to Vince.
What I did was I gave him reductions of what were on the original record versions. So I had, it was a staff with maybe at least 3 parts, sometimes 4, 5, 6 parts. And I showed him, there was bass lines, melody chart, of course, whoever was playing, whether soprano, sax, or flute. And then I would just pick the different, keyboard or synth parts. And if there was one, I would describe it as a certain job. I gave that its own staff. And if there was another synth overdub, there's more like a pad-like type of sound, I would give that its own staff. So I gave him these scores with everything divided up as it is on the records.
Did you have all that stuff in existence already, or had you made scores?
No, I had to make them.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yeah, and then the track "Crossing Troll Bridge" is that's one I orchestrated top to bottom. Yeah, I orchestrated one. This guy Gordon Goodwin orchestrated one. Yep. What's the other guy's name? So that means Vince did 5, and or how many songs on the record? 9? I can't remember. Anyway, all but 3 of them were done by Vince.
Let me see. Oh boy, I can't use technology anymore. Yeah, there it is. Let's see. It's 10 tracks.
Oh, there's 10. Okay.
Yeah. Holiday, Hope, Diana, Lost at the Carnival, Holodeck, Princess in All Her Finery, Parsley Trees, Trip, and Crossing Troll Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the session was only like a few days, right?
Well, I mean, if there was a week in, I don't know, what was the first one? Was in 2005, and then I guess I went like maybe it was 2007 when the second set. So it might have been altogether maybe 8 days.
It's great. It's a really great record.
Thank you. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people think that it's the review calls it your crowning achievement.
Oh boy.
I don't know if you want to call it that, but
I don't think I've seen that review. Although I do know, I know Vince has said he thinks it's the best record the Metropole ever made.
I can believe it. I can believe that it's really a great recording. And did you have any back and forth with Vince when he was orchestrating? Did he say, is this okay, or did you just said you got it on the ones that he was doing?
No, I sent him these reductions. Like I think there was just an unspoken understanding that this is what, because really those are all but one of them are the identical arrangement as the original records. And then, but the one song he just said, you know what, I think I want to kind of go a different direction with this and do something, put my own, get a little more control. It was Trip, which is, that one's very different than the original recording. To me, that's the most different of any of them.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, good.
Yeah, it became swing, right? It was
yeah. It was like, it's just like, straight ahead big band. Yeah.
And I read in actually, I think it was you saying that you didn't expect Vince to want to work on that one.
Yeah, I didn't think, because I sent him a bunch, and that's what I did. I gave him more than, I must have given him a total of 15, 16, 17 titles, because I wanted him to feel good about what he was going to work with. So I let him pick, I picked the bunch that I would all be happy with.
Yeah.
So then I said, you pick the ones that you think are going to, he knows the orchestra. He knows, he could hear maybe what it was going to be like. So I trusted him to choose, what he felt would be the best results. Yeah.
Well, it's a great result. And then after that, you did this beautiful solo piano record, which I thought was so refreshing, especially after all these records and productions you've done that included heavy orchestration and synths, and the piano record includes some of your originals. And any pianist, if you don't have this record, you should get it, because it's pretty special. Did you? And that's a show of hands. Did you have an idea about orchestrational textures for the piano and how to play those, or what to omit? I always think that's interesting when I hear people play piano with an orchestrational bent in their composition.
Yeah, well, I think that I have been like, well, I'm the father of two beautiful children, and I would find myself having time to just, especially when I was spending a lot more time in Finland at that point. And I had this really nice Kawai upright piano in this place that was in the country. And I just would play things, and I would, this is, over maybe a period of a few years. And I never really took it seriously. And I kind of would think to myself, that might be kind of nice to record at some point. And then, I started, I guess it was, starting around 2009 and 2010, 11, Steely Dan started letting me have these extended piano introductions on a piece or two here and there. And then people just started saying, you really should do a solo piano record. And then I was like, and I just said, okay, the heck with it. I'll do it.
Yeah. Jim, we've been on this for almost an hour, and my time's going to run up, but I can...
Yeah, no, that's true, and I have to get to the seafood store.
All right, well, look, it was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody go buy everything that Jim's ever made. Buy it directly.
Go buy everything Henry's ever made, too.
Jim Beard, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Henry.
Take care. Thanks for joining me for this episode of The Right Key. If you enjoyed the episode, there's a lot more coming. Please click the subscribe and like buttons below. If you want to know more about me or our guests, you can find lots of information in the link just below the video. See you next time.